Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Game Question Forum. My name is Danish Buns, and I'm going to be your host and overall badass for this episode. For those of you who are wondering what Game Question Forum is all about, it is a simple question-answer based show where I try and answer the topical questions provided by you, the viewer. Please feel free to leave your own questions in the comments section below. Anything that I can answer with 500 characters, I will do my best to answer in the comments section. But other than that, I will be making more videos like this one, so if you feel that you have a topic that you would like to see discussed, post it in there. Alrighty, the first question comes in from a guy named Quald. Now I'm just going to paraphrase this a little bit, but essentially what he says is, I've got a simple question, though hard to answer. What are the biggest flaws in Guild Wars 2? In my opinion, the game is awesome, but I feel like it is a little bit too awesome, and there could be some things that I may see in the future that I couldn't see at initial release or during the beta. Also, what do you think about the running animations that tend to slide on the ground? They don't seem very natural, but I can't seem to find out what. Thanks for your question. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, especially when it comes to judging the flaws in Guild Wars 2, is the difference between a bug and a flaw. Now, the only reason I'm pointing out the difference is just to make sure that we don't mix up the two. Because we're in a beta, we're going to get lots of bugs and other things associated to that. And we can't really afford to make those mistakes, especially when we're trying to point out the flaws in Guild Wars 2. So what I'm going to say right now is that a bug is something that is a glitch that occurs when the code of the program or game is not functioning properly, whereas a flaw is something that occurs structurally within the game. Now, we can point out a couple bugs that existed in the last beta. One, for instance, that dogged me was the fact that when you logged out of World v World and you tried to log back in when the server was full, you could not get back onto your character. Now, in my personal opinion, this seems really easy to fix because all you would have to do is kick that character out of the World v World server and put them in the general starting zone of the PvP arena. Now, flaws are a little bit more difficult to explain due to the fact that they can depend on user opinion. There may be some players out there who believe that the massive multiplayer online aspect of Guild Wars 2 is actually a negative of the game, but we know we can't consider this truly because Guild Wars 2 was designed to be an MMORPG. So when we talk about flaws, we have to think about what ArenaNet believes will be a flaw for the game. Now, I personally believe that the biggest flaw that will be apparent to ArenaNet at the release of the game is the fact that the game is really complex for new users and doesn't do a good job of explaining any of the dynamic events or menu bar systems that exist within the game. Now, this was very apparent to me in the beta as I was constantly assisting some of my fellow players who did not understand how to get to the PvP areas or what they were doing in a dynamic event, and it really shaped their personal opinion about the game. Some people actually hated the game because they felt that it was simply a basic rehash of the common questing system, when they didn't realize that dynamic events would actually have an effect on their entire world, and would get to the point where if you were in one area or zone, you could trigger a massive dynamic event that would change everything in the entire world. That's pretty crazy and not very similar to any other questing system that I know of. Of course, we can comment on Rift and those other systems, but they really don't have the complexity or the simple diversity that the questing system in Guild Wars 2 had. And I felt that if ArenaNet had spent a little more time developing an extensive tutorial system explaining this dynamic event system, as well as some other topics, they would have done a really good job at helping new players get used to what's going on in the game. I also found out that a lot of expert MMO players were having trouble playing Guild Wars 2 because they did not understand how the entire system of the game worked. They went in expecting a simple basic rehash of any other MMORPG and couldn't really come to terms with what they ran into in terms of hard events and dynamic events. And I feel that if ArenaNet wants to make this game really accessible to all players, not just the ones that follow this game like a religion, they should put more work into building a really extensive tutorial system that will actually go on and explain dynamic events, explain all the menu systems and other assorted items along those lines. So that's my personal opinion on the major flaw in Guild Wars 2. Now, I feel this is one of the largest flaws because ArenaNet is constantly talking about accessibility to new players, So hopefully they can implement an extensive enough tutorial system that will allow them to achieve this. Now, the tutorial system that they already have in place is really good at teaching players the combat system, which is one of the most important systems that they have to learn, but it just does not do justice to all the other systems that exist within the game. And it really allows users to ignore all the fantastic stuff that actually can happen. As for the animation sliding, I really don't think we should worry about whether it will exist in the actual game. This is one of the things that I feel like the ArenaNet team can really easily handle when it comes to bug fixing. So it really shouldn't be too major an issue. What I'm really nervous about is seeing players actually enjoying the combat and learning about dynamic events in a really extensive way so that they can appreciate what's going on in the background. The next question comes in from a guy named Clatnasty. I'm not going to ask how you got that name. I'm just going to accept that you have it. And he has to say, Glory, is it effective, or would you rather see a different system in place for PvP? Alright, for those of you who don't know what the Glory system is, it is a simple point accumulation system which allows for players to gather points as they defeat enemies and win games. This point system can then be used to purchase weapons, items, and all that good stuff. It's really similar to the karma system that exists within PvE, except this one is completely PvP based. Now, to actually discuss whether this system is functional or not, we have to look at why ArenaNet implemented it in the first place. The Glory system's existence allows for PvP players who are heavily invested in structured PvP to actually develop their character somewhat and make it more interesting for them. It also allows for heavily invested PvP players to constantly keep track of their progression throughout PvP structured arenas. Now, of course, this is a really great system for ArenaNet because it keeps players interested in their PvP even after they get tired of the combat system, because a lot of players are driven towards achievement-based items and titles. Now, the real question is, are there better systems out there? Well, we can talk first about the original Guild Wars system. Now, the original Guild Wars had two systems in place, one being the title point-based system, for instance, Gladiator points or Zaishen points, and the other system being the faction system, where we could reference Balthazar or other factions. Now, the faction-based system would allow players to gather points from defeating other enemies on top of gaining victories, whereas the title-based system only allowed for characters to gain points after victories. Now, what does this mean, you may be asking? Well, the title point system was essentially for players to show off their prowess. I actually remember when StarCraft got his rank 15 emote, which is a gigantic dragon popping out of his face and flying around all over the place. Now, that was epic, and everyone respected him because to get to that point required thousands upon thousands of hours of Hall of Heroes gameplay, which is a type of PvP in Guild Wars 1. Now, Faction was a little bit different in the fact that it didn't allow you to represent yourself in terms of an emote, but rather allowed you to gain really valuable weapons and skills so that you could be more effective in PvP. Now, what Guild Wars 2 has done is combine the 2 point systems into the Glory system. So now that you could keep track of your total points, which will be directed towards your title, and also spend the glory on armor and other aesthetic items. Some would say that this system is more efficient, but others would argue that PvP in Guild Wars 1 was a lot more difficult to gain victories on, and that meant titles were a lot more difficult to attain. One instance of this that I will point out is PvP in random arenas. It actually took you 2 wins before you would gain any points, and this was after the final update. Before, you'd actually have to get to 5 wins before you gained anything. Now, I would say that's pretty difficult, especially when you wound up with an MM in random arenas. God, that was a horrible experience. But back to the topic at hand, I don't think the Glory system will be any less effective as the original system in Guild Wars 1. Honestly, I think they're basically equivalent. They're not very different, and there isn't much to worry about. We can't really tell how effective the Glory system will be in Guild Wars 2 because I think we'd have to wait for about a month or 2 to pass after release to see what people would do and how they would try and take advantage of the system. But as we are well aware, in Guild Wars 1, whenever the system needed to be changed, ArenaNet changed the system. So I'm sure that Guild Wars 2 will work in the exact same way. Alright guys, if you have your own opinions on the glory system, or your own opinions on the flaws in Guild Wars 2 and something that you'd like to see discussed, please post it in the comment section below. I don't claim to be amazing, and I probably forgot some things that should be mentioned. If you guys could point that out in the comment section, I would love to see it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them down below as well. You can also send an anonymous email to camelsilo@gmail.com. To the person who signed me up to Brazzers, thank you, but I don't appreciate it. Well, I do, but okay, that's not for YouTube. And finally, if you guys want to send me a tweet or a really short question, you can tweet me at Danish Buns. I occasionally post funny stuff on there. If you guys want to check it out, just take a gander. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.